So something that I've been asking myself a lot recently is what is more important, spots or stories? And we're going to discuss this, and I'm going to go a little bit more in depth, kind of go back into the videos I used to with my thoughts and opinions, kind of like mini podcast form, which I would love to get going against with wrestling podcasts. But I want to jump right in because I've seen a lot of debate in the IWC. Now, I don't know what's wrong, what's right. You know, I don't run a billion-dollar wrestling company. Hell, I don't run an indie out of the backyard with a ring that's going to break fed. I don't know anything. I make videos about wrestling. That's what I do. Growing up a wrestling fan, though, and I'll be honest with you, man, I thought I was a huge wrestling fan. Like, I thought, because I would watch every week on, like, Monday and Thursdays. I don't think I was ever really into it as much as I thought I was. I was into the really big stuff, like the Nation of Domination, Rock, Stone Cold, HBK, some of the WCW stuff, some of the stuff with the NWO, things like that, where it wasn't necessarily those big spots. It was more the story. Now, if you have a story with spots, it's even better. When you think of the matches in the last couple years, which matches in the WWE have been the most sound actual matches? And to me, one of the most sound actual matches of all time in the last, in this generation was Bray Wyatt versus John Cena at WrestleMania. It led up to the story, and the story in the ring. There wasn't big spots. There wasn't things that are memorable, like jumping off of a Hell in a Cell. But when you're watching it, in the moment, you're like, damn, the storytelling inside of the ring, because it's not just a match. They're not just randomly going out there beating each other up. They're doing things for a reason. It's more psychological. People all the time now go to Jim Ross especially, and Jim Ross will tweet this out. These young guys are doing too much nowadays. They're killing themselves. They're doing all this shit they don't have to. They got to work slower. And, I was thinking about that in this whole debate, whether it's spot or story. And one of the things that PWG and ROH doesn't have, minus, I'll say Jay Lethal's storyline, is they don't have storylines. I mean, the decade's going after Colby Carino and Steve Carino right now. Whether or not Steve ever gets back to wrestling, I don't know. But when you look at it, there's really nothing going on story-wise. And it's the same thing in WWE. They try. They try to build up stories, but either divas get makeup stuff and all this other crap, or you really have no real reason to be invested. The best stories in the last couple of years were three simple ones. The first one was CM Punk. A real-life situation where he was leaving his contract. He was going to leave. He was out the door. And then, you know what? They caved and met all his demands, and then he eventually re-signed. But it was the thing that made everybody talk. It buzzed the world because it was a story. It wasn't something that went out there, even though they did have a 5-star match between Cena and Punk. It was the build-up to all of that that made it great. When you think back in time, you think of that story. You think of that epic, moment. A lot of people go back to Mick Foley. Hey, you're the guy that Undertaker threw off of the cell. Now, you have to ask yourself, and this is where it differs, do you want to be the spot fest guy that only does big spots? Do you want to have the good stories? What do you want to necessarily be remembered for? And I think that's where this comes more to the performer and who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. Stone Cold Steve Austin's storyline where he beat up the boss and took out the guy that, when you're sitting at home, and I'm sure you've had those bosses. I've had that boss working at the restaurant where she was an absolute bitch, and she actually was, like, legitimately. Like, I'm not just being an asshole. But when I quit, I, like, cried because she had such structure, and I actually really enjoyed working for her when I thought I didn't. And it kind of pissed me off, and I would have loved to do some of that stuff. Seeing Stone Cold do that stuff to his boss, which is obviously, it's scripted and planned out, was just so awesome. It was a real-life thing. It was this, you are my boss, I'm fucking with you. I'm trying to take you down. I keep taking you down every week. You get things like DX. You get the Spirit Squad attacking D-Generation X. You get these real things that kind of lead up to something more. Now, I'll be honest with you. I love PWG. I probably only own 3 DVDs in the 10-year history, but I watch every show they have. And one of the things that I notice is that they have the best professional wrestling. But I'm just sitting there going, why do they keep kicking out? Like, he had finisher after finisher after finisher, and they're not telling a story. They're just doing stuff that's making me go, holy shit. And it's just a stream of holy shit moments. And I can look back and go, God damn, that match was fantastic. But when you go back to the Austin thing, do you have, oh my God, the Austin match was great? Or do you have, damn, Steve Austin went after the boss. He took down the man. He did that. Punk left with a contract. Daniel Bryan was held down by this company. He doesn't fit the stereotypical look. He's 210 pounds. He's 5'10". He's not a guy that should be up there with the likes of Roman Reigns, John Cena, etc. He keeps getting pushed down. He gets 18 seconds at Mania, which starts a revolution. And granted, none of this was planned out for 2 years, but the way it happened and evolved is what made it turn out to be the best story. Now, I can't give WWE credit because that only happened because their actual plans fucking fell apart. Like Bautista getting booed out of the building, etc. That's the only reason that really went in. Nobody was thinking at that time, Daniel Bryan's going to work this up all the way to WrestleMania. He'll eventually conquer his moment. We all kind of thought it would happen. But then when it kept getting taken away from him, taken away from him, taken away from him, and he's doing 2 or 3 matches a night, kind of like Seth Rollins is now. He's getting himself over, and he's doing all this greatness. That story, you don't remember the 2 to 3 matches a night he was having against those guys, but you remember that story of overcoming something, and it did. Now, maybe people are just getting jaded because of the John Cena thing. He overcomes everything, loses a match, eventually comes out on top. Still hasn't been in the world title picture. You know, he's now out of it again. But the story with Cena is he just wants to capture a 16th title. That's not necessarily a story. That's not necessarily something I want to see. You know, you have history between the Wyatts that you could build something very interesting. Braun Strowman coming into the WWE. There's a lot of potential for that. Guys like Bray Wyatt where, you know, he keeps going on this supernatural thing, and I think Braun getting called in was great for the story and help building it up, but at the same time, it's Roman. And people aren't necessarily invested in a Roman Reigns, and as much as WWE would like them to be, as this rope is going crazy right here. And I just think that guys like Roman that are getting shit on because these companies are pushing them and they want him to be the next big star before it even happens, that's the part where stories just magically happen and they become some of the greatest thing ever. When you work on a show and you're filming the whole season ahead of time, like Breaking Bad or, you know, Walking Dead or shows like that, you can plan ahead. You can have the whole year done, ready to go, film scripted. WWE can't. Somebody can get injured. Somebody could blow up. Somebody could, you know, blow out their quad in a match. Somebody could get released. There's so many different things that could happen, which makes the storytelling so jaded in WWE. The best stories come about from the past. Like the build-up for Brock Lesnar and Undertaker, where they had one pull apart. And that pull apart was revolutionary. That pull apart was, I can feel this story. Like, yeah, it's kind of cheesy that it's too big for Mania, it's at SummerSlam, etc. But that story and that build was like, damn. This match, okay, maybe it's too big for WrestleMania. They're headed to SummerSlam. I mean, it's kind of weird that he did it. But at the same time, it was pretty cool. It was that story. They had history. Daniel Bryan getting over. Punk going over. I remember that stuff way more than I do all the spots that happen in matches. So to answer your question, whether or not I think a person like Hulk Hogan or can work in today's era where they do like 4 moves and they start to get the crowd behind him and they hulk up and win, I don't think they can do that now. So I don't think you can have in WWE, especially just constant spots. You got to have the stories behind it. You got to have the meaning and the feeling for it to happen. And some of the greatest things in WWE weren't necessarily planned. They came about because other things fell apart. But stories mean so much more. And if you get a story with spots, you're set. But I want to pose the question to you guys. What's more important? Would you rather watch PWG-type wrestling where it's the greatest wrestling in the world, but with really absolutely no story? Or would you rather have story-based wrestling? Something like Seth Rollins taking down the Authority, and the Authority eventually turns on him for getting too big, or, you know, whatever. The New Day. There's so much going into it. I want to know, guys, what's more important? A story or spots? Which one do you look for? Which one, when you're watching a match, do you go, the story's great or the spots are great? Let me know in the comments below.